Hey, what is going on, guys? It's DK. Back at you with another video here to break down week 2 of the USFL main slate on Draftkings. If you're a first-time viewer, welcome to my channel. I make content for Draftkings, for NBA Top Shot, and for Prize Picks. If you guys are looking for more in-depth content for DFS, I do offer that on patreon.com. NBA package, USFL package, and a gold package that includes esports, which is Call of Duty and CSGO. Now, for the USFL package, I'm including a lot of data from week 1. Go over roster construction videos for the main slate and the late showdown slate, player pool of cash EP plays, if-then statements regarding injuries, and the Patreon stream before lock. So all that is included with the USFL package. The sponsor of today's video, guys, is Prize Picks. If you're not familiar, Prize Picks is a player prop site that does offer USFL contest. So how it works is you can take over under passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, fantasy points. You can mix and match sports. You can play a couple from NBA, a couple from USFL. So if you're a first-time user and want to give it a try, you can sign up and use my code DKDFS for a 100% match up to $100. But all right, let's get into the slate. Really quick recapping week 1. So for myself, I did miss the cash. I think I was a little bit too heavy on the wide receivers. You know, quarterback play was not great. There's a few quarterbacks, we'll talk about that. I think we can have some confidence in, but in general, the quarterback play wasn't great. I should have been a little bit more run heavy in my tournament lineups, but yeah, so I missed, but a good chunk of the Patreon members ended up getting the cash. One play I was very high on the field was JoJo Ward. And he had a really, really solid game as a wide receiver, but yeah, I was a little bit too wide receiver heavy in my week 1 build. Okay, so let's talk about the Vegas odds here. So we have Michigan and New Jersey. This is a 41 over under, and New Jersey are 1-point favorites. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, it's a 35 over under, the lowest by far, with Philadelphia being 7-point favorites. And that makes sense with Pittsburgh. It's just going to ground and pound the rock. Just awful coaching on the Pittsburgh side. Birmingham versus Houston's a 41 over under. Birmingham are 3-point favorites, and New Orleans and Tampa Bay, it's a 40.5 over under, and Tampa Bay are 2.5-point favorites. Okay, so let's start off with quarterback. Let's talk about some quarterbacks that stand out to me. So Jordan Ta'amu, 10-7 was, I believe, was the most popular quarterback play on the slate. Now, the positive here is Tampa Bay is a team that's going to spread it out, and they're going to pass the ball, right? We saw 32 pass attempts for Ta'amu, one for 185 yards. We didn't see a lot of the rushing from him. He only rushed the ball 1 time for 7 yards, but we know that's, that's in his range of outcomes. Is he's a guy that can bring you, 50, 60, 70 yards in the ground. We saw it a lot in the XFL. So while Ta'amu did do much in the ground last game, that doesn't mean he's going to do very little on the ground again. So I think what you might see is some overreactions week 1. So with Ta'amu, I still think he stands out as one of the top quarterback plays in the slate. Another quarterback I was mentioned is Shea Patterson. So we saw kind of some split quarterback play. We saw Shea get benched for a little bit. They brought in Paxton Lynch. Paxton Lynch was awful. Then Shea came back and almost led Michigan to a comeback win. Now, he is a guy that does have some rushing upside as well. We saw 8 carries for 31 yards. So I do like Shea here. I don't think he's going to be that popular either. But yeah, Paxton Lynch looked really, really bad. Kyle Slaughter's at 10-2. Another team, New Orleans, a little bit more pass heavy. We saw 27 pass attempts for Slaughter. We did see 4 attempts for 30 yards as well, so I think he's a fair play. And then the team that passed the ball the most was Philadelphia. Brian Scott passed 36 times. That is really, really good to see. Now, not much rushing upside for Brian Scott, but we know Philadelphia is a team that's going to air it out. So Scott, definitely someone that you can have some confidence in, just because I think the Philadelphia continues to air it out. Not much interest in guys like Laletta. Definitely not going to Paxton Lynch. We'll keep an eye on Alex Magoo. He got banged up. If he can't go, then Jamar Smith could be a potential play here. Was solid, 11 of 21, carried the ball 3 times for 13 yards, ran one in as well. So keep an eye on that news. Jamar Smith could be a potential value. And then with New Jersey, as you mentioned, like I mentioned in week 1 video, if DeAndre Johnson starts, I really liked him. Well, he didn't, but they rotated. It was basically a 50-50 split. And DeAndre Johnson went for almost 100 yards in the ground and a touchdown. So if we get confirmation that like DeAndre Johnson's starting week 2, I think he's going to stand out as one of the best quarterbacks plays on the slate for the reason of his rushing upside, right? That is huge. All right, let's talk about running back. So running back, a majority of teams only had 2 running backs. You had a couple of running backs play over 60% of the snaps. That was CJ Marble coming in at only 5.9K. He didn't do a ton, but did rush 7 times for 22 yards, had 2 catches for 17 yards. He played a good amount of the game. And then Trey Williams was the other one that played a ton. He's only 5.3K. So Trey Williams, again, played on 63% of the snaps. He ran the ball 13 times, also had 5 catches on 5 targets. So I think Trey Williams will be one of the more popular running back plays on the slate. And I think it's for good reason, right? He's cheap, and he played, the second most snaps out of all the running backs on for week 1. BJ Emmons, we have him at the top at 8.5. He was solid, did rush the ball 19 times, which is obviously good to see. And he is on an offense that I'm confident in Tampa Bay. He played at 58% of the snaps, did have 3 targets as well. So if you have the salary, I think he is a decent option. Now, for Philadelphia, keep an eye on Colburn news. He is currently questionable. He did not practice on Thursday. So this is pretty significant because Philadelphia, they really only have Holland as the other back. Paul Terry was transferred to the practice squad. They would probably bring him up. But yeah, if Colburn can't go, I think you would feel more confidence in Holland. Now, Holland played on under 50% of the snaps, so I probably don't play him unless Colburn is out. If Colburn's out, I think you can definitely consider him at the top end. You have Stevie Scott at 7.9K. So for Michigan, it was a pretty even split with him and Cameron Scarlett. So Scott played on 51%. Scarlett played on 49% of the snaps. You also have Scarlett, though, at 3.7K. So, of the 2 Michigan running backs, I'm going to lean Scarlett over Stevie Scott, just for the price difference, right? If you're trying to save some salary, I think it makes sense to go there instead of spending up for a guy like Stevie Scott. Mike Weber got released. Tony Brooks-James did not play as much as everyone thought. He actually played very little. So Brooks-James played on only 35% of the snaps. So I don't think we can go there. Now for Pittsburgh, we know they're going to run the ball, but their offense is not great. So Garrett Groshek ran the ball 16 times. Madre London, who put up over 2,000 yards overseas, didn't do much last week. He had 14 carries for 23 yards, but I guess with Pittsburgh, they're going to ground and pound the ball. One guy that stands out, he was a core play for me last week, is TJ Logan. I think both the New Orleans backs look decent with him and Ellis, but Logan is very clearly their pass catching back. He had 4 catches and 4 targets, and that's what you want to see, right? Full point PPR DraftKings. And he also was definitely involved in the ground. So I think TJ Logan stands out as another really good option. His price had come up, but I don't think it came up enough. I mentioned Jordan Ellis. He's 5'4", right? He was the bruiser of the 2 backs. He got in the end zone as well. He's a little bit cheaper, but I think since the pass catching abilities there with Logan, I think I would lean him over Ellis. But I think both of the New Orleans backs look pretty good. Again, we mentioned Marble. On the cheap end for running backs, I talked about Scarlett. That's probably it. I don't think I get to anyone else. Mikey Daniels, surprisingly, so he's the fullback. He was the only one that really got targets for Pittsburgh. So that was interesting to see. But that's it for running back. Let's move on to wide receiver. So for wide receiver here, I can switch over. I have this posted on patreon.com, but let me switch over and show you guys what I got here. So nice little color-coded chart with snap percentage, route percentage, targets, air yards, all that good stuff. So if this is something that interests you, you can check out my Patreon linked down below. But a lot of info here. Again, this is just for wide receivers, but have it up for all the positions. So let's go team by team for wide receiver. I think it's a little bit easier to talk about team by team instead of going, just salary based. So we'll start with Michigan. So, Michigan, I think the guy that stands out the most obviously is going to be Lance Lenoir. He had 6 catches and 9 targets. He was definitely a favorite for Shea Patterson. Now, he was banged up for a lot of that game. If you watch that game, Lance Lenoir kept going to the sideline. So that's, not great, but he's not on the injury report. So I think he's going to be full go. And then the other guy I want to mention here is Joe Walker. So they mentioned on the broadcast that the reason he's on this team is Shea Patterson brought him over from the spring league. He wanted Joe Walker on this team. Now, snap percentage for Joe Walker, he played in 63% of the snaps, so not terrible, and he is only 3.4K. So I think Walker, Lenoir look pretty good there for Michigan. On the New Jersey side, well, they just decided to list everyone on the injury report. As far as snap percentage go, Satterfield played the most, played over 90% of snaps. He also had a really, really big game. I think he's going to be a pretty popular play, but I get it, right? He's cheap, and he played majority of the game, did have 5 catches and 5 targets. He's a big body wide receiver. Kind of looks like a tight end, but I think he looks like a decent value play. And then Cavante Turpin was someone I liked. He was targeted a good amount, just didn't do a lot with the targets. Was involved in the rushing game as well. So, like, the positive with Cavante Turpin, he's going to play out of the slot, and he's just going to be utilized in a lot of different ways. So even though the production really wasn't there week 1, I think he has a chance to have a really good week in week 2. So he's one that I think will be relatively low on because of the bad week 1 performance, but definitely have some interest going back to the well in Turpin. I think the ownership will be very, very low. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So on the Pittsburgh side, well, they did only play 3 wide receivers, but still not much production because this team just ground and pounded the ball. So, like, Jeff Thomas was the most productive receiver. He caught 4 catches and 8 targets, but he's really expensive. I think if I'm going to spend up for wide receiver, I'm going to go for those teams that are going to be more pass heavy, not Pittsburgh, who's just going to ground and pound the ball. Now, Philadelphia is a team that's going to be pass heavy. So you saw Jordan Sewell was a relatively popular play. He didn't do a ton with his workload. He played 95% of the snaps, only had 1 catch. However, he's another one that I could see him having a bounce back week. So at 7K, I think he looks decent. You have Devin Gray on the injury report. He did not practice. Keep an eye on that one. That's pretty significant because Devin Gray played on 75% of the snaps. You had Overton play huge snaps as well. He's only 3.8K. He had 2 catches and 3 targets, but you saw the big game came from Chris Rolland, who had 7 catches on 9 targets. He's very, very cheap. Now, he actually played the second least amount of snaps for wide receiver. He played for the team. He played 67% of the snaps, but he was by far the most productive. So he's another one I think will be relatively popular because he's so cheap and because he had a big, big week. And then Buck Howard. I think he's definitely viable. He had 3 catches and 4 targets. We've got reports before week 1 that he had a good connection with the quarterback. So, and Buck Howard is a former wide receiver, right? So he did only play in 30% of snaps, but he is a guy that I think will be utilized more in the red zones for tournaments. Sure, I think you can make the argument for him. Birmingham. So Birmingham's a team you're going to feel pretty good about. They basically played their same 3 wide receivers the entire game. That's huge, right? Opportunity is everything for the USFL. So you saw Victor Bolden and Marlon Williams both play 100% of the snaps, and Osiris Mitchell played 96% of the snaps. So that's great, right? They basically just played the same 3 guys the entire game. So Victor Bolden, 9-3, he'll be utilized some in the slot. He had 8 targets. Osiris Mitchell, the more big body wide receiver, had the big game. He caught a touchdown. And then Marlon Williams had a ton of targets. He just didn't do anything with them. But he's another bounce back candidate I think you could go to at the flat min price 3K. And then a tight end, Kerry Angeline had a nice game. He had 2 catches and 6 targets with a touchdown. So viable, but I think I'd feel a little bit better about the wide receivers. On the Houston side, so Houston played 4 wide receivers, but played 2 basically the entire game. That was Isaiah Zuber and JoJo Ward. Now, Zuber might get some ownership. He did only have 2 catches, though, 1 in the end zones. That kind of did bail out people that played him. But JoJo Ward, he was a guy I was very high on going into week 1. He had a nice week, 7 catches and 9 targets. 9 targets, that's the very top of target leaders for USFL for week 1. So clearly they want to get this guy the ball. Again, he was very productive at Hawaii. So Zuber and Ward, I think both look good. Would lean Ward, though, for the discount. And let's move on to New Orleans and Tampa Bay. So New Orleans, you had Poindexter. That was a very, very popular play. I played him myself. I took the L on that one. He did play a decent amount, but he 52% of the snaps at 8.5K. I need to see him play more. Johnny Dixon was a little bit better for his price. He had 4 catches and 6 targets. And then you had another pretty productive tight end in Sal Cannella. Had 6 catches and 7 targets. So you've seen a few tight ends have really big games. We'll get to one more here at the end. But Cannella at only 5.2K. Definitely someone I think you can consider. And finally, Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay is another team I have some confidence in just because the quarterback play. However, Tampa Bay really rotated a lot of receivers. So you had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide receivers play for Tampa Bay. Surprisingly, Derek Willis played the most. He didn't do anything with the snaps. Former Cleveland Browns wide receiver. So to be honest, I have a hard time getting to any of these wide receivers. One guy, though, I think you can get to on the tight end side is O'Grady. He played, if you go look at his snap counts, he played 100% of snaps. So while they rotated a lot of the receivers in, O'Grady played the entire game. He had 8 catches and 11 targets. He's only 5K. I think he looks good. Now, I don't know if we get that type of performance again from him, but the snap counts look great, whereas the other wide receivers were really rotated in. So, yeah. I think that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. So if you have been enjoying the content, just make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. All that stuff really helps me out. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one, and I'll see you all in the next video.